In this video, we will look at control charts. This is a topic in Chapter 6 of your textbook. So a control chart is often used to monitor data over time. Often in various production processes, people want to monitor to see if a process is out of control. Are there unusual values that are popping up that would indicate the process needs to be adjusted? So an example of a control chart might look something like this. We have a center line, which is generally the mean or the target value. In other words, this is what we'd like the data values to be close to. Then we look at how the data values deviate away from that. So we go the mean plus or minus 2 standard deviations, the mean plus or minus 3 standard deviations. And then the idea is we plot data over time to determine, are there indicators that the data is out of control or that the process needs to be adjusted. So there's generally 3 rules or 3 indicators that we have an out-of-control system or out-of-control process. So the first one is if we have any point that is more than 3 standard deviations away from the mean on either side. So if I have a set of data like this, I have my target value at the mean, and then notice my upper control limit at 3 standard deviations and my lower control limit at minus 3 standard deviations. So this point here falls outside of 3 standard deviations. So that would be an out of control signal number 1. The second out of control signal is if you have a run of 9 or more on one side of the mean. So if we look at this data set here, notice we have a string of 9 points in a row that are all on one side of the mean. This is very unusual and would indicate that maybe the mean is off, that the mean is drifting up or down. So this would be an out of control signal number 2. The third one is if I have 2 out of 3 in a sequence outside of 2 standard deviations. So again, if we have an example like this, notice here in 3 consecutive points, 2 of the 3 are outside of 2 standard deviations. So this would be out of control signal number 3. So let's look at an example. So suppose we have a set of data. So the first thing you need to do with a control chart is have your target or your mean. Now that target or mean might be what your goal is in your process, or it might be a value you know from previous information or previous experience. Similarly with the standard deviation. In this case, we'll just calculate the mean and standard deviation, and we'll assume that that's our target and that's our appropriate standard deviation. So I draw my graph. The mean is at 44, and then notice if I take 2 standard deviations above the mean, I get 68. 3 standard deviations above the mean, I get 80. 2 standard deviations below the mean is 20. 3 standard deviations below the mean is 8. So those are my control limits. So now I plot my data in order. So 26, 44, 28, 39, etc. all the way across. Plot all 16 of these points. Now I look at my out of control signals. Notice I do not have any values outside of 3 standard deviations. Hence there is no signal number 1. Notice there's no point where I have 9 or more in a row on one side of the mean. So no signal number 2. However, notice here I have 2 out of 3 in a row that are outside of 2 standard deviations. So I would have an out of control signal 3. And so this would indicate that maybe this process needs to be checked or adjusted. And that's the idea of a control chart, is we plot our data over time from some process, and we're looking for indicators that might lead us to believe our process needs to be adjusted.